During my degenerate college freshman year, I've tried almost every popular productivity tip to fight procrastination. Unfortunately, 90% of them didn't work on me. They all make perfect sense, but I just couldn't bring them into practice. Here is a list of the methods that failed. Number 1, eat the frog. This is my least favorite technique, my sworn enemy, because every time I use it, instead of eating the frog, aka the task, I end up getting eaten by the frog. So the gist of this strategy is that you should tackle the most difficult task first thing in the morning, and afterwards it should all be sunshine and rainbows. Makes sense, right? Well, there is just one problem. I'm a coward. The idea of having to confront the hardest thing right at the get-go completely terrifies me, which stops me from starting at all. Think about it. Most of us procrastinators kind of agree that starting is the most challenging part, right? Like whenever I try to start an essay or assignment, I feel like I have to summon all my strength and exert all my energy like Goku just to walk up to my desk. So we already have this pre-existing fear of starting, and now you're telling me to face the most dreadful task first? Hell no, I would do anything to escape from this frog.
I think this method may work if you have guts like Goku, whereas I'm just a whiny fragile slug, so I'm gonna eat the frog. The frog will consume me.
Number 2, break a big task into smaller steps. In theory, this method makes total sense, but while listing the smaller parts of a big task, I get even more overwhelmed because before there was just one task. Now there are endless multiple tasks, so completing one of them will lead to absolutely nowhere. So what's the point, and when is it gonna end? Number 3, methods that use sheer discipline, such as the just do it or the 3-2-1 method. Their key message here is that you procrastinate because you overthink. So right now, at this moment, stop thinking and move your lazy ass to get working. You know what this reminds me of? In Evangelion, Shinji does not want to fight, so his dad keeps pressuring him to just get in the Ava, to just do it.
Do it now.
Just get in the Ava is pretty much how I feel towards these methods, and my response is basically like Shinji's response.
No, I can't! I can't pilot that thing! There's no way I can do this! How can you do this to me?
Or even escaping the city doing nothing to avoid the task. I think using sheer discipline may work when you already like what you're doing. You're just not feeling in the zone, so you need that drop of momentum to get started. But what if we're like Shinji, doing something that we hate? Like in my case, I studied a major I had zero interest in back in uni. Pushing me to just do it only reinforces my hatred and resistance towards the subject. Number 4, the ADHD motivation-driven technique. This I learned from my college roommate Elle, who is a high-performing, highly intelligent ADHD procrastinator. She would not address her procrastination directly, instead let interest guide the way and wait for motivation to naturally kick in, which will boost her productivity. This doesn't work for me because first, I don't have ADHD. I rarely experience a surge in attention levels. But even if I had ADHD, considering that I'm studying a subject that I hate, I'm not sure where to find interest or motivation because there is none. Plus, I'm not smart. Like my IQ barely passes 100, so I cannot pull off cramming a task. Maybe in high school, but not in university when the subjects are much more complex. So having tried all these methods and failed, I started to wonder, am I screwed? Because these are all proven methods that work for a lot of people. And the more I started reading and digging into this, the more I realized that I'm kind of screwed. Let me explain. Apparently, procrastination is more or less a protection mechanism. Our brain perceives the study task as an impending threat because it's stressful and risky, whereas activities such as watching Netflix or scrolling social media come with no risk. So we flee from the study task and pursue these pressure-free leisure activities. And the goal of most productivity tips is to convince you to fight instead of escaping. But here comes my biggest dilemma. I'm a coward, which means I'm risk-averse. I don't want to fight. I see a threat, I flee my ass off. So when I try to apply these productivity tips, essentially I was using willpower to fight my fundamental character trait, which may work in anime world, but often don't work in reality because it's unnatural, against my instinct. Now, remember at the beginning of the video, I said 90% of the productivity methods didn't work for me? So how about the remaining 10%? Well, these 10% are extreme methods that prevent me from taking the escape route at all, such such as locking myself in a room with zero distractions, booking myself a library room that I cannot cancel, etc. Basically scenarios where I'm forced to fight. Okay, since that works, why not just do that and end this video? Well, one problem. When I force myself to fight, yes, I get the job done, but I don't feel good. I feel kind of morbid. It's like in Evangelion, Shinji forces himself to fight, and over time, he manages to kind of settle in, but he never likes fighting. It's against his nature. His honest desire is still to escape, which is why your boy always has this constipated face while piloting the Ava. Now, I know some people will say feelings don't matter, just get over it and get numb, like how Shinji gets over his cowardness and starts accepting his responsibilities. But here is where I really disagree. See, I don't see Evangelion as a story of a boy overcoming his weakness, becoming stronger to shoulder his duties. I see it as a tragic story where, due to unfortunate circumstances, a little guy is coerced into battle royale and forced to abandon his feelings. And that mental strain backfires later on and causes him psychological breakdowns. But I digress, as this is not an anime analysis video. My point is, if we constantly compromise ourselves to act not like ourselves, in the long term, it may not be sustainable. Studying is not a one-off thing, rather it's a regular ongoing task. So if we want to study sustainably, it's probably better to feel relaxed and at ease while studying rather than feeling pushed and forced. Plus, our world is nowhere near as cruel as the Evangelion world. After all, we're just dealing with some petty study assignments. So is it really necessary to enter this fighting mode and feel miserable all the time? While Shinji doesn't have the luxury to be himself, we kind of do. So I would like to introduce this method that stopped my procrastination while allowing me to remain a coward. We just need to go back to the procrastination diagram and flip the situation around. Instead of having studying be the risky and stressful task and playing the no-risk task, how about we flip this around? So it's a two-step action. Step 1, reduce the risk of studying, make it stress-free. Step 2, increase the risk of playing, make entertainment activities more stressful. Let's start from step 1, reduce the risk of studying. I think there are two major types of risks/fear associated with studying. The first risk is imperfection or failure, like spending days writing an essay but not getting the grades you want, or working on a difficult math assignment and just not getting it right. The second fear is rarely talked about, but I believe it lurks deep within our subconsciousness, which is that once we start studying, we're afraid that we won't be able to play anymore, like we're leaving our comfort play zone with no return. And this is exacerbated by our previous procrastination episodes, because when you have to cram on that last day, you've got no time to take breaks. Now, I personally think the second risk is easier to tackle, so let's deal with it first. Here, we essentially need to convince our brain that studying and enjoying life can coexist, that studying does not end your happiness. To do that, I use a method that sounds counterintuitive and even degenerate, but somehow works. It's called the reverse schedule method, introduced by psychologist Neil Ford in his book The Now Habit. It essentially uses reverse psychology, and here is how it works. Let's say I need to work on an essay. If I put it on my schedule as my main task, I will probably not do it or delay doing it because I have a tendency to procrastinate. So instead, I do the complete opposite. I only put things that I enjoy doing on my schedule, like coffee chat with a friend, hiking, watching a documentary, doing band activities, etc. And I actually don't schedule the essay task anywhere on my schedule. Now, I plan my schedule very loosely to make sure I have enough free slots where I get nothing planned. If I want to work on the essay, I could do it in any of those free times. So essentially, I'm organizing my life around the things that I love, and I treat studying more like a side hustle. What this does is that psychologically, it greatly reduces my fear of initiating studying because I no longer see studying as a sad farewell to my fun life. Rather, it's just another casual activity, and I'm still within my comfort play zone. And this method also works when you've got a heavy study load. For example, one semester in university, I took way too many courses, so I had loads of homework and assignments almost every other day. I remember that waking up every morning was such a struggle because I was dreading the day ahead, filled with endless endless studying, and it started to take a toll on my energy and motivation. So I used this reverse scheduling method. I only put 2 things on my schedule: a 30-minute walk outside in the morning and a 60-minute manga reading session with my friend every evening. No matter how my studying progresses, I tell myself that I can do these 2 activities unbothered. And that really helped to uplift my spirit because I had something to look forward to every day. Looking back, I think this method was the only reason I survived that semester. So ironically, by not prioritizing and stressing about studying, I actually end up studying more than I ever could have because my mind is in a relaxed state, which dissipates the fear associated with starting a study task. Let's now address the other risk/fear, the risk of failure or imperfection, which is a pretty valid risk because there's always the possibility that the effort we put into studying may not yield good results. So why even bother? Might as well avoid studying for as long as possible. The longer I avoid studying, the less I will have to study at the end. So bingo, let's procrastinate. How do we convince our brain to ignore this risk of failure and study anyways? I use what I call the scammer strategy. I copy the scammer's way of psychological manipulation to manipulate myself to study. When scammers try to persuade us into buying their products or courses, we often find ourselves easily tempted. Even though rationally we're aware of the potential risk, we're easily deceived because they use a powerful trick that manipulates our psychological vulnerabilities. That is, they always promise that you don't need to put in much effort. Just a tiny bit of effort can get you great returns. For example, I'm sure we've all seen scammer ads saying something like no skill required, only work 2 hours per week and earn 6 figures on this side hustle, or he bought this $200 course which made him a millionaire. The key selling point here is that you could earn quick, easy profits. That small, minimal effort is enough to make you rich or successful. Why not apply this trick to persuade ourselves to study? So I tell myself that I just need to sit down and study just a little bit and it will give me fast, easy results. And I don't just tell myself, I bring it into action. 2 steps. Step 1, get a copy of previous exam papers. I do something called exam topic ranking. The exam paper usually shows how much mark is allocated to each question. Based on that, I rank topics/concepts by their mark value and level of difficulty. We want to prioritize topics that are given a ton of marks and are not difficult. These are the gold mines. They will bump up our grades relatively fast and easy. Regarding the level of difficulty, some may ask, how do I know which topics are easy and which ones are hard when I haven't started studying? Well, I like to rely on past feelings of doing assignments and listening to lectures, which generally give me an idea. But what if I skip lectures and never do the assignments? Well, I suggest you ask your friend or classmates in Facebook groups. But what if I don't have friends and don't want to talk to my classmates? Well, you're just like me for real. I have another video coming up themed around how I made friends in university being socially awkward, so feel free to check that one out. Anyways, where are we? Oh yeah, level of difficulty. I don't know, maybe just use Google. As for topics with low mark values that are also difficult, I will just ignore them for now and only study them if I have time later on. Essentially, what we're doing here is to maximize our ROI, aka return on investment, by strategizing what to focus on. Step 2, do the minimum to get by. What I mean by this is that with studying, the law of diminishing return applies, meaning it's much harder to go from, say, a 90% to a 99% than to go from a 40% to 50%. So given the same amount of study time, if you spend it to study a topic that you already know really well versus studying a concept that you know very little about, the latter will give you a higher return on investment. So rather than trying to understand one chapter perfectly, reviewing every nitty detail before moving on to the next chapter, it's much more strategic to use that time to study both chapters and each aim for just okay-ish, get by level understanding. Like if you go to an exam with a 100% perfect comprehension of one chapter and zero knowledge of the other chapter, versus if you have a 70% knowledge of both chapters, obviously the latter will get you better overall grades. Therefore, when I'm just starting to study, I don't aim for perfection. Instead, I aim for just decent, like good enough understanding of each concept and I quickly move on to the next one. This way, given the same time spent, I'm able to go through more stuff and get a higher ROI. And the result is that with just a bit of time spent on studying, I find myself already getting a really good grasp of what's on the exam and already knowing what it requires to get a passing grade. Now, I'm not saying that you should settle for mediocrity, it's just that in the initial stage of attempting a challenge, be it studying or going on a diet or whatnot, this sort of quick positive feedback gives me the assurance that effort pays off, and it pays off fast and smooth, which easily motivates me to keep going. And this can be applied to essay writing as well. I used to really struggle with essays. It felt like mental constipation, so bad that once I stared at a blank Word document for an hour and a half without being able to write anything. But why is it that we have so much trouble writing an essay when we could easily write, say, a YouTube comment or Reddit post? Like I could write a 1,000-word YouTube comment instantly, no problem at all. What's the difference here? Well, essays just have higher stakes involved. It's being graded, so we want it to be good. We're driven by quality over momentum, which is the opposite case with writing online comments, where we're driven by pure momentum, the desire to get our opinions across when we agree or disagree with someone. But this over-focus on quality often cripples our ability to start writing at all because, again, the fear of imperfection. So to fix this, I once more adopt the do the minimum to get by mentality. Forget about perfection because it's not strategic. First of all, achieving perfection on your first draft is almost impossible. Even some of the world's best authors cannot write the perfect draft at the get-go.
For example, Ernest Hemingway once famously said, "The first draft of anything is garbage."
So what makes you think you can do it? This pursuit of perfectionism is in itself somewhat arrogant. And secondly, going back to ROI, if you ever read your essay grading guidelines, you see that the biggest grade bump happens not at the higher level. Like if you go from having a mediocre thesis and development to having a strong, convincing one, yes, your grade will increase, but not by that much of a margin. The biggest grade bump happens at the bottom. Typically, just writing the essay in itself can earn you like 20% of the marks. Providing arguments that are somewhat logical can fetch you another 15%. Then, listing supporting evidence that are roughly reasonable can get you another 20%. Citing your sources and having decent grammar can get you another 10%. So in other words, even if your writing is very mediocre, maybe even sloppy with occasional grammar mistakes and awkward transitions, as long as you meet the minimum of reasonableness and coherence, you've basically secured a C-. This is a breakthrough from 0 to 60%. It's the biggest grade bump you'll ever get for this essay. So when you're just starting off from a blank paper, you really don't need to worry about perfection. Just see it as if you're writing an online post with the simple goal of expressing your opinions somewhat logically. You can always correct and refine it later on. It's always easier to revise a draft than to write a perfect draft from scratch. Just as Neil Gaiman once said, if you write something, it can be improved, but you cannot fix a blank piece of paper. Let's move on to the last part. Make entertainment activities more risky and thus less attractive. To clarify, I don't think we need to demonize or ban all leisure activities. As mentioned previously, I actually incorporate recreational activities to my schedule. Stuff that I warn against are addictive things like video games and binge-watching TV series. To stay away from them, I don't want to rely on sheer discipline as my willpower is weak. I'm actually going to approach it from a different angle. The way we play video games or binge-watching Netflix is way too comfy. Like, we just chill on our couch, we play whenever we want and however we want, stress-free and with very little stakes involved. Whereas when we study, we stress about a lot of things, grades, ranks, future employment, etc. How about we add the same level of stress to entertainment activities as well? Like for video games, don't just play casually. Play every match with the mentality of a professional esport athlete whose entire career is at stake. This is how my mom cured my Overwatch addiction. In middle school, there was a time when I was terribly addicted to Overwatch. My mom tried to ban it, which did not work, so she came up with this genius idea. She allowed me to play, but I must play ultra competitively. Like, I must set high and realistic goals for myself. If I don't achieve them, I need to self-reflect and report report to her what went wrong in the fights in detail. She made me record the screen while playing so that I could rewatch it and analyze my every mistake. You know what happened after 1 week of doing that? I didn't want to play anymore because it was just too stressful. See, video games is the most fun when it's casual. Once you increase the stakes or make it a job, it just isn't the same anymore, which is why many professional gamers or streamers admit burnout or even quit. Same thing with binge watching Netflix. Like, don't just watch it casually. Analyze it. Write a Rotten Tomato review of every episode. Overthink every plot progression. I did that with Your Name because I was writing an essay about it for my East Asian Studies class. And God, I never wanted to look at that film ever again. So now the tables have turned. We've reduced the risk of studying and made it a lot less stressful while doing the opposite with playing. And now studying actually looks like the easier option. So here you go, a natural way to stop procrastination without having to become strong. And that concludes the video. I hope you find it useful. Thanks for watching.